September 9, 1972. As the sun rises on the suburbs of Springfield, New Jersey, families begin their day like any other. On Wilson Road, a woman is unpacking groceries from her car when she sees her dog returning from the nearby woods with something strange in its mouth. At first, she assumes it had found a bone out in the woods. But as her dog gets closer, she realizes that the unusual item in its mouth is actually the decomposing hand and forearm of a person. In shock and horror, she immediately calls the police, triggering a thorough search of the surrounding area to try and find where the body part has come from. With the help of bloodhounds, officers comb through the nearby Houdele Quarry, the wooded area where the dog had been roaming. Soon after the search begins, Officer Lowell Hardy discovers the upper part of the arm on a dirt road near an in-progress section of Interstate 78. Pushing through thick brush and undergrowth nearby, the officers eventually find the decaying body of a young girl atop a 40-foot cliff, known locally as the Devil's Teeth, due to it resembling a skull's fangs. Lying face down and fully clothed, the body had deteriorated so much that determining a cause of death was impossible. But dental records soon confirmed the remains to belong to 16-year-old Jeannette DePalma, who had vanished 6 weeks earlier. There were no witnesses, no clear signs of foul play, and little physical evidence to go on. While some speculated that Janette had been strangled, the state of her remains made it impossible to verify. Both her purse and the cross necklace she always wore were nowhere to be found. At first, the logs and branches scattered near her body seemed random. But upon closer examination, it appeared they had been deliberately arranged. Some of the officers said they formed crosses, while others described them as a coffin-like shape surrounding her. One even claimed that a cross had been placed above Jeanette's head, giving the whole scene the eerie appearance of an occult altar. Other reports began to claim that red arrows marked on trees had pointed police to the location of the body, and that animal carcasses had been found hanging nearby in the woods. As you can imagine, rumors quickly spread that her death was the work of Satanists, practitioners of dark magic, or a sinister cult, with police officers even pointing the finger at an alleged coven of witches, who they claimed had used Janette in some sort of sacrificial ritual. Occurring in the midst of the satanic panic, was Jeanette's case a true example of a ritualistic occult crime? Or did the rumors of Satanists and witches actually prevent her death from being properly investigated, undermining the truth of what happened? After more than 50 years of speculation about witches, Satanists, and cult rituals due to rumors started by the local police, recent investigations have finally shed some light on the truth of it all. With ties to convicted serial killers and even rumors of a police cover-up involving the son of a local police chief, Jeanette's case is a complex and disturbing one. So was she really murdered in an occult ritual? Or did something even darker actually happen to her? This is the story of On August 7, 1972, 4 days after celebrating her 16th birthday, Jeannette DePalma left her suburban home on Clearview Drive in Springfield, telling her mother Florence that she was going to take a train to visit her friend. However, rather than getting a train, Jeannette chose to hitchhike the 8-mile journey, which was something she'd been known to do in the past, and was extremely common at the time. What happened next, nobody knows, because Jeannette never made it to her friend's house, never called home, and was never seen alive again. The large DePalma family, with Jeannette being one of 8 children, were devout Christians and respected members of the religious community. Jeannette herself was said to be someone who tried to lead others to Jesus, with plans to attend the Trinity Bible Institute in North Dakota after graduating high school. She was the last person anyone in the community imagined would run away or get caught up in any kind of trouble. So the following morning, with no sign of their daughter's whereabouts, her parents Salvatore and Florence contacted the Springfield Police Department and reported her missing, concerned that something sinister might have happened to her. Over the next 6 weeks, volunteers combed through fields and forests looking for any sign of Jeannette. But despite their best efforts, they found nothing. Jeannette had seemingly vanished. Candlelight vigils and church gatherings were held for her, praying for her safe return. But then, on September 9th, a dog returned home to its owner's apartment on Wilson Road with Jeanette's forearm in its mouth. With police heading into the heart of the Houdele Quarry to try and find the source of the arm, They then stumbled across Janette's fully clothed body on the cliff known as Devil's Teeth. But the scene they claimed to have encountered was as perplexing as it was disturbing. According to some of the officers, wooden logs had been fashioned into either a makeshift coffin or an altar around her body, and sticks had been made into crosses that had been left around her. There was something eerie and ritualistic about the way the body and the scene had been staged. Advanced decomposition made it impossible for the Union County medical examiner, Dr. Bernard Ehrenberg, to carry out a typical autopsy. Identifying her via dental records, Dr. Ehrenberg was able to rule out physical trauma such as blunt force injuries, bullet wounds, or other traumatic injuries with the use of skeletal X-rays. But this only confused matters further, because there was no answer to how Janette had died and how she had ended up on top of the cliff. Despite this, Dr. Ehrenberg speculated strangulation as the likely cause of death, prompting the Union County Prosecutor's Office to treat the case as an unsolved homicide. But because he was unable to officially state how Janette had died, her death was labeled suspicious, rather than actually being ruled as a homicide. Even today, her death certificate states that her cause of death is pending further study. When the toxicology report for her came back, it revealed no signs of drugs or alcohol in her system when she died, though strangely it did indicate there was an unusually high level of lead in her body, with no explanation for this ever being provided. Samples of her clothing, including her blouse, slacks, and underwear, alongside soil samples from the scene, were sent to an FBI crime lab for analysis, but they discovered no foreign hairs among the samples, and although they did identify stains on her various pieces of clothing, the samples were all too degraded to be tested for blood or semen. Keep in mind, this was in the 1970s, and forensic technology was severely lacking compared to the tools available to investigators nowadays. The police did receive a tip concerning a homeless individual living in the woods near to where Janette was found, referred to as Red by the locals. According to the tip, he had hastily vacated his makeshift campsite shortly after Janette had disappeared. While this initially seemed like a potential lead, after releasing a sketch and bulletin stating that Red was wanted for questioning, he was found and brought in. And after further investigation, the Union County Prosecutor's Office cleared him of involvement in her death. No other suspects were ever identified by investigators, nobody was ever arrested, and what happened to Janette was never determined. According to Ed Kish, one of the officers who discovered the body, the cops are only as good as the evidence left behind. In Jeannette DePalma's case, there was zero evidence left behind. While there may have been a lack of forensic evidence, the supposed occult staging of her body opened the case up to wild theories and speculation. And it wasn't long before the local religious community and the media began claiming something dark and disturbing was responsible for Janette's fate. At the time of Janette's murder, America was in the midst of a religious resurgence, likely in response to the free love movement of the 60s. This led many religious families to take on more evangelical beliefs, with Janette's own family becoming loyal members of the local Assemblies of God Evangel Church. But simultaneously, this era was tainted by a wave of fear now dubbed the Satanic Panic, in which rumors of witchcraft and Satanism, thanks largely to sensationalized news stories that were often completely false, dominated the public consciousness. While the full-blown Satanic Panic of the 1980s hadn't yet taken root in America, the lingering shock of crimes like those of the Manson family murders was already fueling a belief that dark and demonic forces were emerging from the shadows. The fact that Janette's body was discovered on a cliff referred to as Devil's Teeth, alongside the police officers who claimed she was discovered in a makeshift coffin crafted from branches surrounded by crosses, immediately led to speculation that her death was tied to the occult. Rumors spread like wildfire, and the investigators themselves began looking into the possibility that Janette had been killed as part of some sort of satanic ritual or black magic witchcraft ceremony. Janette was said to be very outspoken about her beliefs, being involved in local community initiatives and actively trying to steer others towards Jesus. Because of this, speculation emerged that she had been targeted specifically because she was such a devout Christian, that she had been picked as some sort of sacrifice to make a point. Adding to all of this, it was claimed that a copy of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible was discovered in Janette's bedroom after her death, leading others to speculate that she herself was directly involved in witchcraft or the occult. Around the same time, reports emerged of disturbing incidents around the Watchung Reservation, which was around 2 miles from where Janette's body was discovered, and was known as a gathering spot for neo-pagan groups practicing their beliefs. These reports included claims about animal sacrifices, including an incident in which Union County Park Police stumbled upon a scene of burning candles, a bowl of blood, and lifeless pigeons with their necks snapped by someone. It seemed clear to the locals that cults were operating in the area, and even clearer that they had played a role in Jeanette's death. Even the police, who were the initial source of these rumors, took these ideas very seriously, with a 1972 Courier News report claiming that they enlisted the help of a witch to assess the crime scene and determine what sort of ritual had been conducted. Though the identity of this witch has never been made public, George Parcell, the then Springfield police chief, backed up this rumor in the press, stating, "I heard that some people from the department supposedly brought a witch out there, but I know nothing about it." Other local cases involving the occult also heightened the belief that the area was under attack by dark forces. For example, a year before Jeanette's murder, the List family in nearby Westfield had been massacred in their home by their father, John List, before he vanished. He claimed he had no choice but to kill them because they were straying away from their faith, with his daughter, Patricia, becoming involved in witchcraft. According to him, he was saving their souls from the devil. If you want to learn more about that case, I've included a link in the description to my deep dive on it below. Ironically, when he was finally caught years later, List would actually use Jeanette's case as an example of witchcraft being prevalent at the time and influencing his daughter. Months before the List case, Patrick Michael Newell had been killed by two of his friends in Millville. They bound his arms and legs behind his back and threw him into a sandpit, watching as he drowned. One of his friends told police that Newell belonged to a Satan worshippers sect and felt he had to die violently to be put in charge of 40 leagues of demons. Both teens were convicted for murdering Newell, and their case led to the Criminal Investigation Section of the New Jersey Police actively looking into the existence of what they called a voodoo cult in the area. These recent cases supposedly involving Satanism and witchcraft helped create an atmosphere of paranoia in New Jersey, meaning that as soon as similar ideas were mentioned in relation to Jeanette's death, the community, and more dangerously the media, fully embraced them. The press ran wild with the speculation, with articles suggesting teenage satanic worshippers were responsible for Jeanette's death, claiming police were actively investigating the possibility that black witchcraft and Satan worship were involved. An article in the Elizabeth Daily Journal, for example, was titled "Girl Sacrificed in Witch Rite" and detailed the various occult symbols found around the body. The family's pastor, Reverend James Tate of the Assemblies of God Evangel Church, also seemed keen to embrace the publicity surrounding the case and the theories involving the occult. In an interview in that same article, for example, he stated that he believed Jeanette had been kidnapped by what he called devil's disciples because she had tried to convert them to Christianity, claiming their fanaticism arose and they killed her. Before long, major newspapers like the Newark Star-Ledger and the New York Daily News were publishing articles about how Jeanette had been killed in an occult ritual. Between the police descriptions of the crime scene, the major news stories, and the claims from Reverend Tate, the idea of a teenage coven of witches or Satanists being behind the killing became widely accepted in the community. Despite claims made by his colleagues at the time, Officer Donald Schwert, who was one of the searchers who first came across Jeanette's body, has long denied the rumors about occult involvement. Donald recalled how he vividly remembered Jeanette was wearing tan pants and a navy blue shirt. The image of her body and the scene had stayed with him so strongly because he had 5 daughters of his own and had found it difficult not to imagine Jeanette being one of his own children. He claimed that his fellow officers began making misguided associations with satanic rituals by misinterpreting the scene, which he felt showed no signs of occult activity. Instead, Donald proposed that Jeanette's death was tied to involvement with drugs, potentially resulting from an overdose, claiming she was found in an area known as a local party spot for drug users. Despite her toxicology report showing no signs of drugs in her system, Donald claimed he was familiar with the people Jeanette associated with, and that they were heavily involved with drugs. His theory was that Jeanette had likely overdosed and died while partying with fellow teenagers atop Devil's Teeth, who then fled the area in fear of legal consequences rather than providing medical assistance, leaving her body to later be discovered. He was later quoted as saying, "Somebody had to be with her because she had flip-flops, and I had hiking boots on, and I had trouble getting up that little hill up to where she was laying." Edward Salzano, who runs the Justice for Jeannette DePalma Facebook page and used to work as a private investigator, has similarly theorized that drugs may have been involved in her death, though not because she was doing them. Instead, he has claimed, "There was a really bad group of people here in town. There was some evil stuff going on here, and there was a lot of people caught up in it, and LSD was being basically introduced for the first time. There was just a series of unfortunate events, and she got mixed in with the wrong people, and they killed her." One of Janette's nephews, Ray Sajeski, also denied that his aunt was in any way involved with drugs, stating, "My aunt was no angel, but she wasn't a drug addict. It was the 70s, a lot of people smoked pot, it was normal. But no, it wasn't drugs. No way." Despite the claims from Janette's parents about her being quiet and spending all of her time dedicated to her religion, her own diary revealed that she regularly attended parties, drank alcohol, and kissed boys. Her mother even once moved her to a new school in an attempt to protect her from what she deemed were negative influences. This is by no means to say that any of those things are abnormal. Instead, it simply makes it less implausible that Janette may have associated with other teenagers who could have been involved with drugs. In November 1981, after years of frustrating efforts with the Springfield Police Department, Janette's mother Florence decided to hire a private investigator to attempt to figure out what truly happened to her daughter. However, all attempts to obtain information by them were either rejected or ignored. And over the years, any attempts to review crime scene photos or evidence were shut down, with the Springfield police claiming that all of their records from prior to 1995 had been destroyed in a flood. No evidence was retested, no suspects were investigated, and eventually Janette's case turned cold and was forgotten by the world. That is, until two journalists began investigating it in the late 1990s. And made some shocking discoveries that completely changed everything that was known about the case. In 1997, the editors of Weird New Jersey, Jesse Pollock and Mark Moran, received a letter from a fan called Billy Martin titled, "In the Watchung Mountains." In it, Billy told them how he remembered a case where a local dog had discovered a human arm, triggering an investigation into a case involving ritual sacrifice in the Hoodile Quarry near Springfield. Jesse and Mark found this information intriguing enough that they wanted to look into it and try and figure out what case Billy was referring to. But in an era predating online searches, they initially struggled to find any details matching Billy's story or to confirm its authenticity. Regardless, thinking it would be interesting to their audience, they published Billy's letter in their October edition of their magazine, Weird New Jersey No. 9. To their surprise, the publication sparked a strong reaction among many of their readers who had grown up in Union County in the 1970s, including one who simply told them her name was Jeannette DePalma, and she was found on an altar. Now knowing Jeanette's name, they soon uncovered details about the case, how her body had been discovered in the woods, with claims of the area being adorned with occult symbols, and claims that either witches or Satanists were responsible for her death. Yet, despite the many years that had passed since Jeanette's death, when the pair attempted to interview locals, they found that the fear about what had happened was still prevalent, with nobody willing to go on the record about the case. There was a strong belief that Jeanette's death was the result of occult practices, and that the police had been involved in covering something up. With fears that the killer or killers were still at large, everyone they interviewed seemed scared about what might happen to them if they helped bring attention back to the case. With nobody willing to engage with them, and police refusing to cooperate with them and claiming that all of their records on the case had been lost or destroyed, it seemed impossible to determine fact from fiction. They did, however, receive a number of anonymous letters, filled with chilling details. One letter came from someone who remembered hearing about a cult known as the Witches in the area. This group allegedly planned to kidnap and sacrifice a child. Another letter, from a relative of a local cop, described how the search for Jeanette's body had led to arrows carved into trees, which seemed to guide investigators to her remains. Dead animals were found tied to trees and in glass jars, and shortly after, the reports of similar animal mutilations surfaced in the nearby Watchung Reservation. Others reported there had been more ritualistic crimes in the area, claiming the Springfield police had covered them up so as not to tarnish the reputation of the town. Their research eventually led to them writing the book Death on the Devil's Teeth, which is now considered the most comprehensive account of the case, and is frequently reissued as new information comes to light. After years of trying to obtain official documents on the case that supposedly no longer existed, it wasn't until 2021 that Mark and Jesse finally made the breakthrough they had needed to help clarify what really happened in the case. After filing multiple requests under the New Jersey Open Public Records Act and the Freedom of Information Act, Jesse and Mark finally received the case files in February of 2021, despite years of claims by the Springfield police that they had all been destroyed in a flood. Perhaps most importantly, the files they received included crime scene photos, finally allowing a glimpse at the claimed occult scene described by police and in the media for the last 50 years. Shockingly, after examining the images, it seemed painfully clear that there had never been any evidence of occult activity at the crime scene. There were no crosses made from sticks. There was no coffin or altar formed from logs. There were no signs of animal sacrifices, and there were no photos of red arrows carved into trees. There was nothing abnormal at all. The closest semblance to a cross near the remains appeared to be 2 decaying tree branches that had almost certainly fallen in the location long before Janette was killed there. There was even a crime scene diagram drawn by investigator Glenn Owens, which clearly showed that the claims about occult symbols and black magic rituals were false. His own diagram clearly showed that the branches did not form a coffin-like structure like police claimed, and that there was no log structure forming a cross above her head as they had publicly stated. As far as the crime scene photos were concerned, they showed nothing but naturally fallen logs among the dense overgrowth in the woods, as would be expected anywhere in the Houdile quarry, with the area looking no different from everywhere else around the investigators. So this all raised a huge and uncomfortable question. Why had the police made these claims and speculations about occult symbols if even they had clearly known all along that it wasn't true? As well as showing that police claims about occult symbolism were false, the photos also revealed that claims from officers like Donald Schwert about the area being a known drug party spot were likely fabricated as well. The pictures clearly showed that Janette was discovered in an area with extremely dense overgrowth, surrounded by large bushes and foliage, making it an almost impossible location to have functioned as a party spot or gathering place. There were also no indications of such activity in the pictures that you might expect if it were true, like discarded bottles, drug paraphernalia, or trash in the surrounding area. The case files also revealed that Janette's purse was missing, and that the contents of it had been emptied out around 8 feet from her body. The items found included a pack of tissues, a Vicks inhaler, a compact, lipstick, a comb, a key on a ring, a small eyeshadow box, and what the police labeled as a clear vial with an unknown substance. Alongside her missing purse, there was also no sign of her cross necklace or any of the money she had on her when she went missing, strongly suggesting a different kind of foul play had occurred. Her family had long reported that her necklace was missing from the crime scene, but had been shut down by police, only having their suspicions confirmed with the release of the files 50 years later. So Mark and Jesse's investigation had finally been able to confirm that many of the claims made by police, from occult symbols to the files having been lost or destroyed, were false. But rather than providing any answers, this only added to the mystery surrounding the case, and to the belief that the police were actively involved in a cover-up of some sort, which would explain their strange behavior around it all. John Bancy, one of Janette's nephews for example, has claimed that he was told by a reliable source that the son of a police chief was involved in his aunt's death. According to the information he received, the unnamed police chief's son was infatuated with Janette, but she had turned down his advances. Something then happened that resulted in him killing her. John then claims that the body was placed where it was later found on the cliff to make sure a police officer discovered it, claiming that it was extremely close to a police shooting range in the woods. According to his account, this person later took their own life, unable to deal with the guilt over what they had done. Another theory I have seen circulating online is that Reverend Tate's son, Wayne Tate, may have been Janette's killer. While there isn't any specific evidence to back this claim up, it seems to have come from recent revelations that Wayne briefly dated Janette, breaking up 2 weeks before her death. With his father being an extremely vocal advocate for the occult theory, inserting himself into almost every aspect of the media coverage and investigation of the case, this theory proposes that he was attempting to shift blame away from his son. As far as I can tell, Wayne or his father have never been investigated or questioned in regards to the case. Although the occult theory has dominated Janette's case for decades, there is an alternate idea that a number of investigators have explored, that she was the victim of a notorious serial killer. Despite his outward appearance as a family man living in a middle-class New Jersey neighborhood and working as a computer operator, Richard Cottingham was a predator who targeted young girls and women. He would later come to be known as the Torso Killer. His modus operandi was chillingly consistent. He tortured, sexually assaulted, and brutally murdered his victims before dumping their bodies in a wooded area. According to his own confessions, he had killed somewhere between 85 to 100 women prior to his arrest. Not only was Cottingham hunting in New Jersey at the time of Jeanette's death, but in 2021 he reached out to Jesse and Mark of Weird, New Jersey, suggesting that he may have been involved in the case, claiming that he picked Janette up while she was hitchhiking. Adding credibility to his claims, Cottingham is known to have killed other similar aged girls in the same general area, such as Marianne Pryor and Lorraine Kelly, who he picked up while they were hitchhiking before dumping their bodies in the woods of Montvale. Prior to his recent confirmation as their murderer, after providing authorities with details only their killer could have known, there had long been speculation that the same person who killed Janette was responsible for their deaths. Documenting these letters in a revised version of Death on Devil's Teeth, Jesse and Mike promptly informed the Union County Prosecutor's Office about this new information. The UCPO did speak to Cottingham about his claims, but as far as I'm aware have not announced any new information about whether these discussions resulted in anything or not. It's worth pointing out, typically Cottingham's victims were violently murdered, and there was no indication that this was what had happened to Janette. If you'd like to see me explore Cottingham's case in its own video, let me know in the comments section down below. While no real revelations have emerged in the case since the release of the police files in 2021, there has been significant attention brought to it in the media, in part thanks to the Justice for Janette organization. The organization was set up by Edward Salzano, who we briefly mentioned earlier in the video, alongside one of Janette's nephews, John Bancy. Although John passed away in 2017, Edward has continued to advocate for Janette, continuing where the Weird New Jersey investigators left off and interviewing any and everyone he can to try and find answers to what truly happened. In a recent documentary, Edward was quoted as saying, "I think there's something very sinister that went on here, enough to cover it up forever and for people that we've talked to be still afraid to talk about it." An intriguing point raised by Edward and his investigation is that the dog that discovered Janette's arm was small, and there was no evidence that it had torn the limb from Janette's body. The crime scene photos clearly show the foliage around Janette as untouched, which wouldn't have been the case if the dog or any other animal had been scavenging from her body. He instead believes someone could have placed the arm near the apartments to help lead investigators to Janette's body. Edward has even attempted to sue the Union County Prosecutor's Office in an attempt to force them to test Janette's clothing and fingernail scrapings for DNA, believing that modern forensic advancements could enable new information to be uncovered. Similarly, his group has advocated for Janette's body to be exhumed, wanting new tests to be done to determine her cause of death and identify any potentially usable forensic evidence, arguing that because the case was clearly mishandled in the past, and may have even involved evidence being covered up, there's a high chance important evidence was missed. The coroner's report makes clear reference to occult symbols that we now know were not present at the scene. So if they were willing to fabricate those details, it's not a massive stretch to imagine other elements of the report may be inaccurate too. Even though her body was badly decomposed, trace evidence such as hair, skin cells, or fibers could still offer valuable clues. Modern methods like touch DNA and mitochondrial DNA analysis can extract genetic material from even the most degraded samples. So given her clothes were said to have stains on them that were too degraded to test at the time, these types of modern tests could potentially be used to identify her killer once and for all, and put an end to 50 years of rumors, speculation, and lies. But as of 2024, Springfield Police Chief John Cook has simply stated, "What I can say on this case right now is that it is still an active case of a suspicious death, as there has not been any evidence, as of yet, to be able to officially rule it a homicide." So what do you think really happened in this tragic case? Were the decades of stories about witchcraft, Satanists, and ritual sacrifice nothing more than rumors fueled by a nation gripped with satanic panic? Did these occult rumors ultimately undermine the case, preventing other important avenues that could have led to identifying suspects and finding answers from being explored? Was a notorious serial killer actually responsible for the crime, as he has claimed? Or were the Springfield police themselves somehow tied to the murder, resulting in them spreading rumors, concealing evidence and covering up what truly happened. We can only hope that one day soon we finally get some answers. And with that, our exploration of Jeannette DePalma's disturbing case comes to a close. Longtime viewers of the channel may remember that this case was one of the first ones I ever explored here on the Mystery Abyss. But not only was the script very poor, but I messed up the sound mix so badly on the video that it's almost unlistenable. Oh well, you live and you learn. It's such an interesting case that I thought it was worth giving it a new, updated video. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe, and drop a comment down below with your thoughts on the case. Until next time. You have been watching The Mystery Abyss.